I'm definitely with you, Wardy. I do feel like it's interesting to kind of consider how SpeCial has been playing in his TVTs and how he does have this kind of slightly unorthodox style and going for a lot of those like multi-factory Cyclone openings or even mixing the Banshees and stuff. And I do feel like Clem actually does well in chaotic games, but it's like a specific type of chaotic game. It's not chaotic or weird in just the sense that his opponent's doing something strange. It's when everything is a bit of a mess and there's just a lot of action or things happening everywhere. The games where I do feel like, yeah, Clem sometimes does falter is when it is a weird opening or something is reacting to.
Yeah, and this is going to be Clem who's playing a little bit more aggressively early, just double gas versus one gas. One gas expand at 2000 atmospheres macro game. Nice, just get your CC down, but there is no ramp up into that natural. That can leave you vulnerable to some of the 2 gas timings. So there is something to be said about that. Clem just playing that bit safer, while SpeCial just being a little greedier. Obviously, this typically plays out in SpeCial's favor. You can get the CC down fast, a couple SCVs ahead, and Defender's advantage is usually good enough. It all depends on how much each of them commit. You know, how much Reaper Hellion does Clem build? Does he cut and go Reactor earlier or into a Cyclone? How much does SpeCial build in response? We will see. But overall, I like this for SpeCial because the worst thing that SpeCial could play against would be proxy 2 racks or any sort of just 2 racks Reaper pressure. That's obviously not happening. So in that regard, I think SpeCial has somewhat gotten away with at least the first major problem with the 1 gas expand.
Yeah, and of course, Clem going around scouting for proxies means that he didn't send anything across the map either. So now he's finally sending that first Reaper across the map as he gets ready to get up the minerals to take his own expansion and everything. But it will take him a little bit of time to identify that this is anything other than, you know, it's clearly not a proxy at this point.
Yep. Yeah, it's just being able to kind of see there's nothing really around. And now we're just going to get that reactor from Clem. What Clem does like off a fast reactor like this sometimes is to keep going Reapers, because he's not start a starport, and there it is, more Reapers. So it really gets that Reaper production up quickly. You can even go to 5 Reapers instead of 3, maybe get that extra bit of a punch in, and then of course your reactor's already set up for the transition. That's something which obviously SpeCial will not have here. So he just builds Marines, a Hellion. With the setup that he has, he's not going to build a tech lab or anything on the racks because it's blocked by the starport. So I kind of wonder what his plan is. I assume the racks... I actually don't really know. Maybe the starport goes somewhere. The racks is going to move to build an add-on. Okay.
Yeah.
Just add-on moves back a bit. Okay.
Yeah. So when you do go for like the reactor Reaper and potentially go up to like 4th and 5th Reaper, we'll see if he ends up doing that. What kind of damage are you actually looking to get done with these early game units? Or is this actually just like a early defensive thing? Because normally I'd imagine you're going to want to do some sort of move out with this.
Yeah, in this case, he just said 2 Marines after, right? In which case, that means I actually don't mind that because that saves you 100 gas, starport a bit fast, Cyclone a bit sooner, etc. It's just a possibility, right? Where you say, okay, if I do go for it, then I'd like to trade off with these units. It might not have been a bad idea here. If you give up 1 Reaper on a Widowmine, you trade out against the rest, you might get a few SCVs. That's all you really need to tilt things into your favor that little bit. So you don't really need a lot necessarily. In this case, 3 Reapers and 2 Hellions is the go-to gold standard, right? And honestly, the only thing I would say is that it wasn't really needed here because SpeCial skipped a couple of Reapers, so Clem could have been greedier. But again, these are the cutting of the corners that you just got to do or you don't do in TVT. It's hard to know exactly what your opponent's building all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, speaking of just kind of knowing what your opponent's doing, this is the first real scout that Clem has had on the other side of the map, and considering he didn't really have to do a lot of Reaper harassment himself, it's the first real engagement, or I should say, that either of these players have had. Hellion's going to continue to chase down that Reaper. We see some reinforcements coming in forward for Clem, but at the end of the day, these units have already started to serve most of their purpose for the kind of the early game stages of TVT. We're already starting to see Ravens and the Siege Tanks coming on out.
Yeah, you get into the more important units now, right? Neither player wants to, entertain the idea of just fighting or trading early, doing early damage. At some point, you might see a couple of Reapers try and hop up and backstab for some damage just to trade them out, because they have kind of gotten past their best kind of, stage of the game. In this case, it looks like 1 Reaper scouting, 1 on each watchtower. That's another great way to use it. It's a lot of map control that Clem still has. He has got map control here, to the point where I wondered maybe if he could have built his own 3rd CC on location, and just sort of said, right, I'll put my own 3rd on location, and that would have made up for him being a bit behind on the 3rd CC, but again, it's a risk, it's something he doesn't necessarily want to do every time. Biggest thing to talk about at the moment is that SpeCial goes for a 3rd Raven here.
Yeah.
If he goes for a 3rd Raven, that means he's not going to quite have a Viking count, but he'll have a lot of, bursty kind of power, because he'll have an extra Raven. Clem's going to go for Vikings instead, which means he can zone those Ravens and deal damage over time. It's going to get interesting. It's only the Ravens and the Cyclones that kind of get on by here, but if he gets the reactor on the starport, that would be massive.
It's going to be pretty hard to actually defend since the SCV repair is clearly not going to be there in time. Now, that's a lot of Raven energy that was just used up. The Cyclones might be in a little bit of trouble, but they do get managed pretty well. So SpeCial gets out of there alive with that, and kind of unfortunate there for Clem. He was moving out on the right-hand side, so his units are pretty slow to react to all of that.
Yeah, Wooderman gets a little pickup there as well. Just looking at the Ravens and what's going to be left, honestly, one of them will have a Matrix, and then there's a third Raven, so there's going to be 2 Matrixes probably before a fight. So SpeCial is kind of just okay. I don't think he gets overwhelmed on a counterattack at all, and that was really nice because that just slows down the Vikings and it actually allows SpeCial to take a Viking lead while having a third Raven. So the one thing I was talking about what would be SpeCial's disadvantage won't even be his disadvantage here. So that's why it was a really beautiful move.
Okay, well, we're starting to see the posturing over here from Clem, looking for an angle. Sees that a lot of the units are, with that scan were actually moving away from that third base, so he's going to try and set up his siege tanks over there. Raven's got to be careful about the single Viking that will start gradually picking away at the hit points, but so far, SpeCial has been able to leverage his solid defensive skills, being in position, just using the scans, and it does seem like both these players are going to be able to get up their third bases safely.
Yeah, you can just see the value that SpeCial gets from just, killing an important reactor and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely impactful. And, Clem getting himself Matrix there, but was already moving away, so saving that tank. Good back away from Clem. He didn't really want to fight. He doesn't want to go up against the Raven disadvantage, not with a better positional advantage of his own. So good defense from SpeCial, but even nicer to just see Clem knowing that he's got to back away, but also just not running away, not caring at all. He's sieging up a couple of tanks, trying to take advantage of maybe SpeCial stepping too far forward as well.
Yeah. Now, you're talking about that reactor on the starport. It has been rebuilt over here for Clem, and it's worth mentioning that the Viking count isn't super heavily in favor of SpeCial just yet, but as the next 2 Vikings pop, that is when you're going to start to see, it's 6 Vikings versus 3, and we don't see any Vikings in production still for Clem, even though he's rebuilt that reactor. So the air superiority is really going to start snowballing in favor of SpeCial, especially as he's able to use these Ravens to get rid of some of the siege tanks on the low ground. Auto turrets being dropped. It does look like SpeCial's going to be able to break on through, but loses most of his Marines in the process.
Yeah, they're going to see some more auto turrets dropping down as well. To be fair, there's a lot of Vikings that ended up dying from SpeCial. This fight started, I think, really well for him, and I think he just chased a little bit too far because by the end of it all, he lost all 3 of his Ravens. He lost all of his air control. And he could have just stopped while he picked off a bunch of stuff for free and then backed away. It was enticing. It was one of those fights you feel like, oh yeah, I'm still good here, right? I can still go. But that's the kind of the nuance of TVT. No one actually, this is going to go wrong real quick. And it really, really did. Like, if you have a look at the army graph, you can just see how Clem dropped first, but SpeCial dropped more.
Yeah, just around the same size, even though it did look like SpeCial had a slightly larger army at the beginning. Well, now we do have a little bit of a stalemate here outside of Clem's third base, but Clem is looking to try and end that stalemate with a little wraparound on an army. SpeCial unsieging his tanks up. Is he just going to go for a retreat, or is he going to go south? And, I mean, this gets really weird because now they're going to identify each other. And Clem is going to be able to do a nice little sandwich here if he comes in with the other side, but maybe he doesn't even need it.
Doesn't need it at all. Those tanks were not sieged up. SpeCial was not expecting this to be over here. At the same time, Marines in the main base are going to get 9 SCVs. A few more Marines coming through, and that is just brutal because that is obviously just Clem with a complete cleanup. You could see in that fight where it was just that, SpeCial had no idea that Clem was up that ramp. He was very late to siege. 3 tanks were dead before they sieged. The Marines were gone, and Clem just had more as well, right? And this is where Clem is now fully taking an advantage of this. And yeah, I mean, that's a huge turning point in this game.
Absolutely. And for those who are wondering, the worker counts, of course, in StarCraft, worker counts are really important and everything, but losing 9 or so workers, especially at this worker count, but in this matchup in particular, is not nearly as impactful as losing all of those siege tanks, losing all those high-value units. It's going to be pretty tough for SpeCial to, I guess, make that bounce back before the next engagement breaks out.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really tough because, well, what he can maybe do is he can just play like super defensive. Obviously, that's kind of TVT in a nutshell, right? When you're behind, you just defend. Let's see what Clem can do if he can break into anywhere in particular. He sees a lot of Marines over here. His tanks will start a siege and SpeCial rightly backs away. Something like a 10 supply difference, upgrades aren't that far apart.
Ooh.
I don't really hate, like, it's obviously not great for SpeCial, but it could be much worse.
Yeah, extra stim over there from SpeCial. I mean, he had a lot of his Marines already stimmed just to run away initially, but he stimmed up looking like maybe he was going to try and pounce on some siege tanks that were reinforcing, but he saw still a lot of units over there. He still needs some time for these medevacs to heal up the rest of these Marines to ensure they don't just die to the siege tank volley, but I think he is going to be able to... Oh my god, maybe he won't get it. Maybe the siege tanks will obliterate everything.
Yeah, SpeCial is actually running the problem of just not having information. Why did he lose the first fight? Didn't have information. Why did he just take masses of Marine losses there? Didn't have information. No map control. And it's difficult to have that map control because Clem's on the map. He's got the larger army, and that's one of the things you sacrificed earlier by losing a fight. Now Clem can be the player to kind of pick and choose. And I always love to say that in TVT, I'd always prefer to be the player on the map because you are the one that can create opportunities, and it just gives your opponent more chance to mess up. And a lot of the time, that's what TVT is about, is this attack in is going to be held off for the moment at least. But obviously, Clem is still trading somewhat decently, and as long as he's trading, I mean, SpeCial's still playing catch-up.
Yeah, siege tanks on the right-hand side of this third base have already been taken out over here, so SpeCial not going to be able to have as easy of a time defending this right-hand side if Clem is able to inch his way in over here. And it's definitely going to be an opportunity to try and break through, but he sees that the more siege tanks are coming in to reinforce, he's going to back off with his siege tanks and potentially just send... Okay, it looks like some scouting Marines. Finds an opportunity to try and take a fight over here. SpeCial going to engage into the siege tanks. There are those Marines holding the line for quite a bit of time, and even though, yeah, a couple of siege tanks died over there, way more dies there for SpeCial.
Yeah, this was a situation where it's like, I actually think I can overrun the tanks, right? But the tanks stayed alive way too long. And it's a fine line because if he gets rid of 2 tanks earlier, he has the Marines to go all the way, and we're like, SpeCial, what a fight! That was just not it. They got too many shots off. It was too many Marines given up. And even tanks getting away from there. I mean, SpeCial needed every tank. And there is something to be said about obviously resetting the tank count a bit, but there's also something to be said about the fact that now SpeCial has a third of the Marine count as Clem right now, and that just gives Clem, again, so much mobility, so much, chance to move around the map, right? He's able to go one way, then the other. His army's much more mobile, and that's what the Marines bring to this Marine tank versus Marine tank force.
And that's actually exactly what Clem really needs right now to try and break through over here, because he is basically trying to bounce back and forth between the bases looking for opportunities, and he has found a little location over here. The tanks are on the front lines, and the Marines are very far back as Clem tried to get up some kind of weird defensive posture over there. Ends up losing quite a bit. He does get the planetary fortress, though, and that is a nice snag. Gonna lose 2 siege tanks in the process.
Bad fight for Clem because he was focused firing the planetary. So when he initially, as these Marines are going to move through, they're going to get that sense tower, and we'll get some SCVs. So what happened was you're kind of hitting that planetary when you could have already cleaned out a line of Marines, and then another shot goes in the planetary, and you do kill it. A risky game, because if that planetary doesn't die, you just lost a fight for no reason at all. So Clem, a little fortunate there, and obviously is hoping to take advantage of just the eco lead as these Marines backstab. He knows SpeCial wants to make something happen after losing that fourth base, and it's the right call. These SCVs just gonna don't run in. I mean, save yourselves for maybe a better moment, as there is going to be the fight across the map, of course, as SpeCial lines up to set up a siege on Clem's fourth. But if Clem gets hit on the left side, he now has the bottom of the map. He's 2 bases up.
Yeah, I think he's fine just trying to take some trades over here. And the Marines are going to try to stim on forward, try and take out some of those siege tanks. A lot of the Vikings over here for SpeCial are doing some serious work. He's definitely seizing some of that air superiority over here and kind of inching himself forward. But Clem is still doing damage on the other side of the map. And like you said, he can also just start moving more toward the bottom right.
SpeCial's like, who needs 60 Marines? I just got 60 SCVs running at you. Just running left, right. I'm going to push this drop back. I love what Clem's doing, by the way. You see the Ravens in production. It's one of those things which I really think Clem, in the past, was more reluctant to do. He would have preferred to get Vikings and then just play Libs, a bit more kind of later game, but not late game. Whereas the Ravens are really a step towards control and late game, getting more matrices out. It's the longer term play, and I love to see Clem being comfortable enough doing that, because that just means that in TVT in general he's feeling good. How does this drop turn into some Raven snipes? Amazing stuff for Clem. Just once again, being on the map in general is something Clem has taken full advantage of multiple times in this series.
Yeah, I think you look at any Terran player and say, would you trade a medevac for 2 Ravens? It's like, yes. Would you trade the medevac for 2 Ravens and all the other damage the drop did? Heck yes. Clem is going to be feeling really, really good about how he's been able to just seize control in the game, like you said, with his aggression so far.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're going to see our Vikings and Libs coming through. Of course, this is still Clem's issue, right? Not really having the anti-Liberator setup. And just the fact that there is air superiority. Now, the Raven count is growing, so this is something you can deal with over time. He's going to maybe give up this base. Maybe he counterattacks. If he loses this base, though, he also loses the bottom right base, and that's why I'll get worried. Let's see what he can do with the counter. He will force Special to back away somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. This is just where it gets really weird, though, right? Because he wants to force a fight. Okay, well, he doesn't want to force a fight with the anti-armor missile all over his army, but the Siege Tanks gonna try and hold the line over here, doing some nice splash damage to some of the Marines, but all of these Siege Tanks are gonna end up getting cleaned up. There aren't that many Marines left over here for a Special. This is where I was talking about, though, Wardy. It gets so weird because now you're basically base trading against a hyper mobile force of just Marines.
Yeah, you're base trading against that. You also have less bases to start with as well, right? You know, that was the main base, Orbital, that's just fallen. So you just have less real estate to work with in a base trade. Now it's genuinely a factor as Clem's just going to trade these Marines out for as many tanks as he can. Oh my goodness! It's just a tank massacre, and yeah, that's why it's tough. Like you say, you know, you've got all these Marines, they can make plays like that. They can jump on tanks if they're trying to get in position. It's so difficult to play a mobile setup with tanks over Marines.
Exactly, and it's not even just that, it's that Special was already on the other side of the map. He was on Clem's side of the map, so if the Marines are ahead of you getting back home, it's like, what can you really do? You have to just try and speed back as fast as possible, but as soon as you do that, you're also giving up the opportunity to say, like, I'm going to slowly make sure my siege tanks are sieged up in time for the fight. You're basically kind of just guaranteeing that your opponent's going to be able to get a nice jump on you.
This is going to sound a bit dumb maybe, but Special would have been okay if he was in Clem's position where he's got more bases and stuff, so he can just sit back and say, cool, tanks here, here, and just really defend. Let's remember the start of this game, because Special genuinely was in a very good start, and then Clem really brought it back, and that fight was really the turning point, and Special never had the advantage again after this. Special tried to do something similar here, and we talked a lot about how this just wasn't the same effect, right? You lost so much. Tanks and Marines survive. It cost you some Vikings. Yeah, Clem obviously, when he caught those tanks previously, really took
and watch the tanks on the north side. You'll see, there was a lot of that focus fire and everything on that planetary. So this is where things kind of got a little bit weird for Clem, but that final stem up and everything really does just end it.
It did get weird, but it really was like he got the job done. Like he got the base, and by getting the base, he forced Special to be all in, which he was ready to deal with. It would have been weird if he didn't get the base. Say like just doesn't die, the tanks go down like a moment sooner, and then you're like, crap, I just lost my army, and he is like gonna counterattack me with economy behind it, and that's a very different game. So that's the only thing I didn't really like from Clem. I think just the fact that it was almost being a bit too risky. Instead of just saying, taking the safer play and just trading out in general, he went for the kind of like, he went to put Special in right then and right there. So that would be my only criticism, I would say. Obviously, early game a bit wonky as well for Clem, but that's TVT. Early game can go a little bit here and there.
Yeah, I think you put it really well during the game also. It's just, I think one thing to keep an eye on as we move into Romanticide for game number 2 is just Clem's ability to seize control of the game with his aggression. Both is like actually being aggressive on the other side of the map, but also aggressively retreating back with his units and finding like these flanks.
Absolutely. Is in the bottom right side of the map. Can he keep his DreamHack season finals run alive? This is our Blue Terran Player Special.
And up here in the top left-hand side of the map, we have our red Terran player currently sitting up 1-0 from Team Liquid. He is Clem.
All right. Romanticide, always an interesting map because it really plays very slowly, right? Because it's already a defensive map in any matchup. And then you add TVT to that, and you get a lot of these games where players just don't find a way to attack into each other. The game drags out. And in a very, I won't want to say uninteresting, but it kind of is. It's very, laid back. Players don't attack as much because there's no benefit to attack on a map you can't attack on. So we do see that a lot in TVT, and even from someone like Clem. There's countless times where Clem has played Hero Marine in ESL Weekly or something, and he has just built up for 20 minutes, and then they've started fighting. So even someone as aggressive as Clem accepts the fate of Romanticide a bit. I do mostly question if Special will play mech or not.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit before these games start. He did play Marine Tank last game. I think that's fine. He can play Marine Tank, but we know he likes mech. it's a good map to play mech on, perhaps, and you just lost the Marine Tank versus Marine Tank game. And this map kind of plays in somewhat similar ways, if not more, even better for how Clem was going. So maybe go for mech here. We'll see.
So I'm actually really curious. When you're talking about mech, are you thinking about like the slow, methodical style of mech, or are you thinking of like the style of mech that it felt SpeCial was really leaning toward, where he was really skipping out on a lot of his siege tanks and everything, going for heavy Cyclone, heavy Banshee, like very mobile kind of aggressive force?
Yeah, I actually don't know, honestly, because I feel like the mobile aggressive force runs into the same issue that Marine Tank runs into on this map.
Yeah.
It's hard to be in positions. Right away, you can maybe do something. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like Hyperflight Rotors this game.
Yeah,
like
the Banshees
done
could find
before.
value.
Yeah, because Banshees can move around a lot better, and on a map like this, that may be your way in to deal damage. I don't know if I'd like to see Cyclones, but like I say, even then, Cyclones can be okay early. It's the follow-up kind of later on that you're going to just want tanks anyway, so it's hard to say. I don't think I'd mind either way, and maybe just something aggressive is good, because taking control away from Clem can be good. Clem wants to take control himself. Starport on the right-hand side here, so rather committed to getting something immediately done with some Hellions, it would seem. Let's see exactly how Clem builds this up.
Yeah, always fun to see Clem with the proxy starports. I do feel like I see, of all the Terran players, I do feel like Clem is definitely, if he's going to do a proxy, I feel like it usually is the proxy starport. And, I mean, we've seen him get some really nice damage done with those before. He's going to be going for the medevac this game.
Yeah.
So it's going to be loading up some of those Hellions. Going to try and find some damage as, well, so far SpeCial is just staying at home with all of his early game Reapers and Hellions and everything. So I feel like this might be a little bit of a tough sell, right?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about it. Obviously, Clem will have the mobility to maybe go into the main or something. I was kind of wondering, I wonder if Clem picks this because SpeCial played a little bit greedy last game, one Reaper straight to Marines, etc.,
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, if you do that again, sure, this should go well for me. But obviously now SpeCial's got 3 Reapers, 2 Hellions, the gold standard, right? And that should be good to defend here. Of course, so much of this is position as this medevac sneaks around the right-hand side. SpeCial does not get to see it, so it's going to be unloaded in the main base before SpeCial knows, and that means you are likely to get SCVs. Doesn't matter if you've got the units to defend, if they're not in the right place, and here we go, we're barbecuing SCVs today.
Yeah, already finding 3-6 workers. A lot of the SCVs still around over here. And these Hellions, oh my god, they're actually going to get picked up before taking really any losses there. A little bit of damage taken, but 8 workers, and there's nothing really to shoot up outside of maybe an auto turret that gets dropped down, but drops out the Hellions there. Not necessarily gonna pay off for him.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like you didn't need. I like the idea of like going down, but I thought he was gonna pick up a little sooner. The nice thing is the medevac's alive, the Hellions are alive, so there's still a threat going on. Let's have a little look at this and just see how it went again. As we do have ourselves. I feel like this is not quite the replay that we thought we were about to see. That was not quite the tech we were expecting. Oh my god, SpeCial's morphed into the game, Fear Dragon.
There you go, man. Picture in picture in picture in picture. But you do have an auto turret coming out over here, so finds 2 more workers. All right, so that's bringing up the total to 13 worker losses for SCVs. Definitely I mean, I know that TVT is not the matchup where workers are always the most important thing, always. But that is a pretty substantial lead this early on.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, man. This is not like 2 or 3 workers or like, there's nothing SpeCial has to fight back. Usually if you're down on workers, you can say, oh, I've got the army to move across the map, force them to pull workers, right? And like, you trade out your army supply for the worker difference. No, man, this is 10 army supply to Clem, 10 worker lead to Clem. This is going to be really tough. And that's why SpeCial's sending the Ravens across the map too, because he knows he needs damage. He's not in a game where you can just sit back and chill.
It's scary,
he needs to get things done. Yeah, it is
scary.
Yeah,
because, I mean, especially with the Cyclones that now actually 2 specials, benefit. The Cyclones are moving out across the map with the Hellions, so there's not going to be a whole lot of anti-air over here to actually help deal with these Ravens. So now the Ravens are going to come on in. Clem definitely notices this, and he is going to already be able to force out an auto turret pretty early on, honestly.
Auto turret versus auto turret's fun. I love that auto turret, trying to zone the Ravens on that right-hand side. SpeCial. Okay, he puts the better HP Raven on the bottom side there, so he doesn't lose a Raven.
Does he? Okay, on the right-hand side, I see some army movement there from Clem. Is he trying to hunt down those units? No, he has one Raven that's retreating home.
But he might be able to drop the auto turret.
He has energy. Passes over it. Yeah, it doesn't.
If he had a better idea of where the Ravens were, but he doesn't know if the Ravens are still chilling there, if they're heading home, so it's hard to predict, right? And I think realistically, you need the auto turret ahead of the Ravens to get a kill.
But here we go.
Cyclones!
Locks
no.
onto one.
No, he has both. He has both of them.
Oh my god, he does.
Oh, wow, Clem. The Cyclones we talked about on the map earlier turned into something, and now he's going to turn and fight Cyclone for Cyclone so far. He is going to have to back away. SpeCial only, SpeCial,
That's so much, though.
This is like the moment where it's like, you know what? SpeCial's meant to have an army supply lead and come across the map, but Clem actually does have the army supply lead.
Yeah.
So
this is brutal. This is really brutal. Losing those Ravens really puts SpeCial in an awkward spot so early on. He's got one Raven left over, but he's been behind on economy for such a long time. Actually, these aliens are going to come in, roast and toast a handful more of these workers. Not a massive amount of damage and everything, but SpeCial has basically just been playing catch-up in a lot of this, and because of that, you can already see that Clem now does have other tools he can use for this push.
yeah, you know, honestly, it's just the fact that the Hellions aren't going to do much anyway, right?
Yeah.
Just trade them out. SpeCial is playing mech, right? So he's got the extra factories down, so he is getting to a good tank count and stuff eventually. Right now, it's only 3. Nothing is already sieged, like, really walking up this ramp.
It's only tanks. That's all he has is tanks and one Cyclone.
I mean, I would say that, I mean, you just auto turret these down, I guess. You maybe could have Matrix and got sieged yourself, but you're just going to mass auto turret. The Vikings of SpeCial land to try and hold on. And now Clem's going to land his own Vikings to get rid of this last tank here. New tank in the main, though, I mean, honestly, I feel like SpeCial did better than I thought he was going to.
Yeah.
I think Clem's problem is his tanks just sieged up so far away. Like, you know, they could have been a few steps further forward and they would have been part of the fight, but they just weren't part of the fight for a long time. Now Clem misclicks back in. I actually really think he just misplayed this because A, the tanks were too far back, and B, I really think he just dropped a bunch of auto turrets when if he just matrixes the tanks so he can get his tanks in position, I think that's just a much easier fight to win. It's so difficult to say, right?
Yeah.
This is, I mean, maybe if the instant replay is working, maybe we could look at it because it was one of those fights where it's very interesting to say, well, what did go on there? You know, could you have done it better? But when you've got to make these decisions real quickly and like right in the moment, that's really, really tough because, you know, those scenarios, they play out so differently every single time.
Yeah, TVT is an unforgiving beast when it comes to the engagements and how fast you have to make a lot of those decisions. But we do end up seeing a situation where now SpeCial has been able to take pretty solid defense there, and mech is always one of those funny things where you do have that vulnerability period where you're trying to get up all your factories and you're waiting for that first round of the units to come out. SpeCial's actually made it past that, and even though he's down a bit of supply and everything, there's been some weird trades back and forth. SpeCial is going to start getting into his comfort zone, which he really just wasn't able to get into in some of those other games we've seen from him.
Yes, I think that's going to be one of the big things, that Clem really doesn't have much option right now than to kind of wait it out and to play it slow. And I mean, he's going to do all the right things. He's getting the 4th base in place already, right? You know, he's set up to play this well. I will question a little bit just what exactly Clem does next. Does he just try and take, you know, his momentum and maybe run this through to like a bigger advantage? Or does he actually just kind of go and start making his way into his own later game setup, right? Clem's going double armory. Now, that's either a misclick because he's obviously built 2, and he did build them in different places, but in very similar timing. So I really think he might even think about kind of vehicle upgrades and stuff to kind of set up. He's got 2 starports as well for early games, so yeah, maybe he's really just going to go for that air domination right from the get-go, and I like that rather than just trying to bust someone down on Romanticide.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen some Terran players that double down on air control versus the mech, and it can be incredibly effective sometimes just because, yeah, mech doesn't usually come with a lot of immediate early on answers to, you know, re-seizing air control outside of just, yeah, I have a lot of Vikings. And actually, if we even take a look at the Viking count right now, Clem is really killing it in the Viking count. He's already a few Viking, or like 4 Vikings ahead, or will be after that round of production.
Plus 2 Ravens.
Plus 2 Ravens.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, Bordy, I don't think the Ravens benefit from weapon upgrade. Yeah. The 2 Ravens are going to be so helpful versus this kind of army.
Yeah, because you can either use them to help win the sky even more so, right? Even just an anti-armor missile.
They'll survive too unless they get focus fired. And if you focus fire them, then you're losing the Viking battle even worse.
I'm just going to stim in on this 3rd base. He will get the 1 tank that's here and maybe a couple SCVs, but other tanks showing up. SpeCial, we're going to siege those, right? Yes, we are. It just took a moment or two. Clem backs away, but You know, maybe you can argue Clem here is trading out units and you rebuild better things, but there is Marine Marauder coming up on production. I just feel like right now this isn't it, as the Ravens are going to go down because he just sort of ran in ahead of, with them. They were kind of meant to do a bit more there. It's such a weird place for them to be ahead of the Vikings because obviously if they were ahead of the Vikings and the full fight on top of the tanks, the casting, sure, but yeah, that's actually SpeCial making a nice pickoff and giving him some better chances moving on. He needs to do something because libs are coming up, and we know what those libs will do if there's not enough anti-air.
Well, it's starting to see that SpeCial's trying to go for the big breakout over here, and there aren't that many siege tanks left over, so he should have a pretty easy time of it. He's going to be able to do a nice little cleanup there, and actually takes out some extra units in the air. But, I mean, this is kind of a weird spot now for Clem, because like you were saying, there's maybe going to be that transition over to the Liberators and stuff, but he is also physically maxed out right now, so he really does want to be able to actually start doing something with his army ASAP. The longer he waits, the more time SpeCial's just going to have to max out his own army and compete with it.
Yeah, at least Clem's going to advanced ballistics, though. That Liberator range goes a long way when trying to use libs in this kind of situation. SpeCial's going to try getting to Cyclones. It's really rough because once those libs are up, trying to get a lock on with the Cyclones, they got to go through lib zones. Yeah, that's really tough. And right now, this is already kind of nice. Just going to get a couple of tanks and then chase forward. The Bio's actually able to get far enough forward to get rid of the turrets. That's massive because the tanks will get rid of the turrets. So one of the things that SpeCial would have been relying on here is now disappearing, and he just doesn't have much anti-air. The couple Cyclones will help, but I'm not sure if that's going to offset what is a massive Viking difference for sure.
Oh my God.
Here we go. Big fight breaks out. The Liberators are just going to be sieged, and even more Liberators showing up. I mean, SpeCial's going to lose so much here. I mean, this mineral line has to back away. Yeah, he's got one Cyclone.
Yeah, it is actually just an empty ground force that is devoid of any form of shooting up.
Run, Cyclone, run! Oh, he nearly got a Liberator, but that's kind of what we're talking about. He nearly got a singular Liberator.
He's gonna get two.
I mean,
it's just not enough.
You just siege up on top of the tanks again, right? The Vikings could really land here as well. I mean, it's scary because if you land the Vikings, lose air control. Your libs aren't as good, right? But I think we're in a point where you can. The Vikings land on top of the tanks, gonna clean this out. And we're just going to lift those Vikings back up once again as our Liberator will just stay in position right there. Yeah, I mean, 200 to 140 supply. I don't need to do the math on that one, Fear Dragon.
Damage has already been dealt, and Clem, of course, just going to be remaxing any of the army that he gradually, slowly is losing in any of these trades. But he's just powering it across the map. He already smells that there's blood in the water right now. Yeah, the Liberators can't kill the base itself, but he's basically denied any of the mining over there. He's taking the rest of the map. And I think as soon as Clem finds one more opportunity to just capitalize on that air superiority, he's going to be able to start moving on forward. Really, the only thing that is keeping Clem from just pouncing on him right now is just that some of the Cyclones have been replenished.
And they've got Magfield now as well, so they will do a bit of a better job. But the problem is the more Cyclones you build, the less tanks you've been building.
Yeah.
So the more this Bioforce might just be able to run in and have a, have a party of its own. So something to look at there. I mean, what we've got to say is that Clem, obviously, if nothing else, is just being great at expanding, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, a few Hellions will run by, but Clem's just got bases for days. And even if he lost all these SCVs, he's still up 13. He might actually be, better off for losing a few SCVs, get a bit more army on the map, help him to overwhelm. But, of course, he's building up a massive bank during this, which you can't complain about either.
Yeah, Cyclone's getting some nice lock-ons to a couple of the Liberators and the Vikings over there. We also see Thors in production 4 at a time here for SpeCial, which has been one of those options that Terran players will look at versus Liberators. I do really think you have to be extremely careful with the posturing and positioning of your army to make use of those, because if the Thors are getting body blocked by a lot of the rest of your units trying to get in range of the Liberators, it almost just feels like the Thors are hurting more than they help.
That's an amazing set of lock-ons, though. 4 Liberators go down in sync, so at this point, I'd love to see Clem stop building those Liberators. Like, I actually think he's at the point where he could actually just really benefit from just having more bio units even, because the tank count ain't that high anymore.
Oh boy.
Libs are going to siege up. This fight just fully breaks out. Clem loses a ton of bio, but the Libs do stay alive to get the job done initially. Now he's getting his own tank sieged up. Libs are going to re-siege from Clem again. He's gotten rid of the Cyclones, so it's the Thors, but Thors, okay, they
all
have the
Liberator zones.
They have the
Liberator zones.
Yeah, they have the angle for one lib, but then they can't get closer because of lib range. So, hectic fight. Kind of a wild one, but I think Clem's still okay. Now 7 libs being built. Yeah, I said I would have liked him to stop building libs, but they're still doing well enough,
Yeah.
I just wonder if maybe you trade those libs out and then he rebuilds pure bio. It's tough, right? Because there's still siege tanks and so on. Maybe this is where we'd like to see him go back into, like, you know, what we saw last game, some Ravens. Maybe that would help out a little more, just really tech it up a little further. Because there's a point where these Liberators just can't do much, but there's also a point where the Liberators stop SpeCial from ever doing anything.
It gets so tough for me to call here, Wardy, just because the Thors, I feel like they can be so hit or miss with the Liberators, but we're going to start to see Thors working away at this army. Now the Liberators start to get to fire back, though, and look at the Thors just get demolished by the Liberators. This is what I was talking about. GG gets called. Clem is going to take the 2-0 victory over SpeCial, stays alive.